You're watching The Conversation on News Central Television. Now, Kenyan President William Ruto has dismissed almost all of his cabinet ministers and promised to form a new government that will be lean and efficient following weeks of protests over high taxes and poor governance. In a televised address, the president also dismissed the Attorney General and said ministries will be run by their permanent secretaries. Ruto said he made the decision after listening to the people and that he would form a broad-based government after consultations. Kenya has seen 3 weeks of unrest in which protesters stormed into parliament on June 25 after a finance bill was passed that proposed tax increases. More than 30 people died in the protests, which have morphed into calls for the president to resign. Now, at this time, Dennis Nthumbi, governance and security expert, joins me to talk about this, and of course is in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you so much, Dennis Nthumbi, for joining us to talk about this.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
So let me first get your thoughts as regards the finance bill first, then the dissolution of the cabinet by President William Ruto, which of course was a reactionary move to the protests that engulfed the country.
Thank you very much for having me in the show. And of course, the public acrimony was arisen out of certain tax measures or certain tax considerations that the public felt were not in tune with, sort of the economic burden that the people are going through. And therefore, certain discussions were initiated. The Kenyan Constitution allows for elaborate public participation under Article 1 of the Constitution, where it says power rests with the people. And therefore, they asked the parliament to look into this. There were certain delays from parliament, and the president intervened and called, parliamentary group meeting of his party, asked them to remove certain aspects of taxation that were touching on very sensitive issues or commodities in life. And unfortunately, even though those issues that the public wanted removed were removed, the public really did not want an amendment or an adjustment to that finance bill. They wanted the entirety of the finance bill scrapped off or rejected. They rejected it completely, but the second reading passed thereabout, which led to violence in the streets and have such, an acrimony thereabout. And so the president has done certain strong considerations that have come from the public, and we are seeing the results of such in a very, very short period of time. He has managed to include certain demands from the public to have that look and feel in his government. And technically, the term broad spec is that he wants the people to feel that they are part of governance of the affairs of the nation every day.
Well, you talked about consultations and parliamentary precedents taking place before this finance bill, passed the first reading. But then this particular bill seems not to have resonated with the people in the first place, because if you say that the power resides with the people, you probably would have done some sort of consultation across board, bringing people from different sectors, both the public and the private sector, to look at this particular finance bill before it is presented to the parliament, and of course before it's now eventually ratified. So why is it that the president didn't do his due diligence on this finance bill, knowing fully well that there have been taxes over time? Like when you look at his administration all the way from when it came into power up until now, it has been all about taxes. And the question has always been, when would he stop taxing the people? So now, does it look as though he actually didn't, do his due diligence in terms of consulting the right people before tendering that particular bill to the parliament?
The president has accepted to certain misgivings from the political forum, but really we have to be just, because the president does not superintend parliament. There is a clear doctrine of the separation of power, where parliament is separate, executive is separate, and the judiciary is separate. And there is a committee that does budgeting, really, that should have taken this considerations strong enough. Indeed, Parliament did not need presidential intervention to be able to listen to people. So the leadership of Parliament itself, from the people, it looked like it wasn't sensitive to the cries of the people. Part of these tax measures, basically, which was supposed to be revenue measures to be able to fit into sort of the deficit budgeting process of government, were touching on certain commodities that people consider sacrosanct. They're about things like bread and thereabout, and so the president intervenes and says, remove those ones. There's already an acrimony at the end of the day. And so those ones, then Parliament considered them. There should have been what it is that we call, a careful consideration, a careful risk assessment to listen to the people well enough and stop this bill from being discussed or from being debated, do away completely with it, go back to the people and ask them exactly what they want, and then do work with the people, because there are certain aspects that in this country you can't come up with certain considerations if they haven't been generated from the public, and that's what we call public participation. The concept of public participation is not the fact that the ideas are being generated from elsewhere and the public is being asked to read, is the fact that the public are the generators of these measures or considerations. The public decide how to govern themselves, and then the National Assembly's work is really to ensure that they represent, even in verbatim, when policy comes, it is the voice of the people and represents the accuracy of the people. And I know that where we are possibly government was stranded in terms of where do they get these additional deficits and additional revenues? Were they purely going to come from austerity measures? Or where are we going to feed in sort of these 300 and something billion shillings? And so I believe that from a parliamentary perspective, there were tactical errors that Parliament was supposed to consider and not really expose the president to certain risks as to where we are right now. But I think this comes as a blessing to the president, because I believe that at some point the president wanted to rework his cabinet.
Okay, so you've talked about the legislature or the legislative arm. Let's just dwell more on the executive arm now. Now, some people have actually criticized the president of actually appointing political cronies and not even technocrats to actually handle the various ministries, and now it seems to have backfired. You said it's a plus for him because, of course, he wants to rejig his cabinet. But then when you look at the caliber of people that actually makes up his ministerial team, would you say that these people are incompetent?
Now, first of all, there's a lot of disinformation that has taken shape. And this disinformation has put the country into a more fragile state. I think to a certain degree, the cabinet has performed in terms of delivering what it is that we call the bottom-up economic plan. And really, there's clear evidence that certain measures have been undertaken by Parliament. And these were always captured through the cabinet dispatch that was being sent to the public every single time cabinet met. But let's be realistic. The president had a campaign. That campaign was closely contested. He had his allies. And then not only that, His Excellency got into a coalition with certain political parties. So the first trench of creating his government, he needed to sort of pay for his political promises, and not just that, include certain aspects and considerations and horse trading aspects of the coalition. And the reason why I'm saying is that sometimes this is good and sometimes this is bad, because any president who doesn't pay for the political promises, the president really had, it's true, he had his cronies, he had his coalition partners basically to consider for their demands. And then not only that, the opposition was in the streets, and then we have a retired president basically who is trying to get him out of power. So there were too many risks to contend, and he had to work with wisdom. I am saying this comes as a blessing to him because it gives him an opportunity to constitute a professional cabinet full of autocrats, people who have the measure, the weight, and the know-how of how to articulate the bottom-up economic plan that he has put in place that's extremely elaborate.
So Dennis,
different dynamics.
Sorry to cut in. So Dennis, it seems as though what he did was just to practically sacrifice his cabinet as scapegoats to save his own face and administration. That's what it seems.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. And as I have told you, the Kenyan constitution is people-centric. The first thing that the president has done is accommodate the views of Kenyans. He is mandated and obligated to do that. We are not an autocracy. We don't rule by the fist here. We rule by the mind and the heart. And the president has accommodated the fact that people asked him to change his cabinet so that his performance is accurate on performance, and this is what the president has done. And that has given the president the opportunity to deliver possibly a cabinet that doesn't have political obligations, or it doesn't have, at the end of the day.
Hello, Dennis.
And he said it's going to be broad spec. I will look for technocrats across the government, subject experts within the ministries, and I will give you experts that will deliver. That is an extremely good thing for the country. Whether you call it saving face, whatever it is that you call it, the president has the opportunity now to deliver. And this, of course, will see him get re-elected. I think it's extremely positive, and it has come at a very, very timely place.
Okay, cool. Now we've looked at it from, we looked at it internally. Let's look at external forces or influences now. Well, it's been argued that most of the policies implemented by President William Ruto were IMF and World Bank induced, and as such, they backfired. So would you actually blame these international bodies for recommending what is called anti-people policies to Kenya and by a large extension to Africa? Because the question has always gone around the kind of recommendations or suggestions that these international bodies give in terms of terms and conditions when they're trying to apply for a loan, trying to get grants or bring creditors to come around and talk about debt restructuring and all that. And these terms and conditions are always in the line of remove subsidies, increase taxes, do this and that. That seems as though are inimical to the welfarism of the people. So fine, if you say that, well, the president has the opportunity to now choose the kind of people that work with him. What about these external forces and the kind of conditions that are put to bed? Because we have these African presidents run to them hand in cap for funds.
Thank you very much. It's a very important question. If you follow the narrative and the discussions that the president has been having within international forums, he has been the one African president that has been championing for the financial and economic liberation of Africa. He has publicly called out the Bretton institutions for negative credit analysis and ranking at the end of the day. The fact that the global south is being mistreated and abused, and our credit rating and even our repayment processes and terms and conditions are not the same as everybody else. So at the end of the day, we can't squarely say that the president is purely working to satisfy the demands of IMF. That's not accurate. However, the president took power and took a country that was going to collapse at the weight of external debt at the end of the day. It was too much. We had Eurobond to pay. The strength of our shilling was declining. Inflation was off the roof. And he needed to strengthen, much more especially, the economic aspect of the country. And you have to demonstrate to lenders that you have the capacity and the capability to pay.
But he has spent almost 2 years now, Dennis. And all these things that you've mentioned, we've not really seen them. Kenyan citizens are not really feeling the impact of the change that they actually clamored for or they yearn for.
I'm a Kenyan citizen. That's inaccurate, sir. I'm a Kenyan citizen and we feel the impact. First of all, we have the best performing shilling, not just globally. Number two, we have the best stock exchange in the world. Number three, the cost of foodstuffs, the cost of living has come incredibly down. Number four, the cost of fuel in this country has come down. at the end of the day, this is attributed to the governance of His Excellency William Ruto in simply within 2 years. And that's something to applaud about. You know, we have to fight disinformation and give credit where credit is due. What Kenyans are really pissed off, and as I said, was the braggadocio and careless nature of politicians displaying wealth that possibly is from the proceeds of corruption. That's number one. Number two, tax considerations, basically, that did not factor public participation. That's number three. If you had it, really, the cry about the cost of life, cost of living here was not something that was too preeminent. Kenyans are really truthful and sensitive in terms of what His Excellency William Ruto should deliver. Our shilling is stable as at now. We are not where we used to be 1 year ago. So there are certain aspects that the president has delivered, and we thank him and we congratulate him for that. Now, where the government must struggle is to see where do we get this deficit funding from.
Okay.
At the end of the day, and His Excellency has clearly put in place austerity measures, reduce government spending, ban foreign travel, reduce the number of parastatals.
But
at
Dennis,
the end of the day, that is something that he has done effectively.
Dennis, do you think he would have done this if Kenyans had not staged a protest? Because he was actually planning on increasing the salaries or a moment of some certain ministries and departments. And also, you know, I think the office of the First Lady was actually trying to apportion some certain amounts of money for that. Then when the protest came up, he had to rescind on those decisions. I'm looking at the sincerity of government here, of William Ruto here, to actually cut down on frivolous spendings. And that is one area I'd like you to speak on.
You've asked a very critical question. First of all, you have to understand that, you know, in this country, the president is not autocratic by nature. There is what we call devolution and decentralization of power. The president in this country does not have the capacity to increase anyone's salary. That is part of an independent commission called SRC. It was them that increased the salary, were proposing to increase the salaries. This was brought up in 2023, where the president himself objected, and the commission refused that objection and brought it up at the wrong time. It almost looked like sabotage. Again, he has declined for the second time, saying that he doesn't want a salary increase himself. That's not the work of the president. He doesn't do that. What you've said is accurate in terms of the facilitation of the office of the First Lady and the facilitation of the office of the Second Lady. Truthfully asking, and what is this that I'm saying? Unfortunately, I'm seeing patriarchy and male chauvinism taking center stage here. What is the problem with women in governance advancing governance? What is the problem with the office of the First Lady being able to articulate some of the things that needs to articulate? The office of the Second Lady is actively involved in fighting alcohol addiction to a male population here that in certain quarters of the country that is actively being killed by dangerous alcohol. You know, we have to balance this conversation. And unfortunately, this protest that had honest voices has also been overtaken by coup plotters. And not just that,
coup plotters.
Politicians who politicians who are against, you know, who basically they want to take advantage and they want to settle scores and whatever it is.
Are you talking about oppositions, Dennis, or non-state actors? Both
non-state actors and state actors. They took advantage of, you know, as you're aware now, including the entire, the Inspector General of Police has resigned. The entire police commission, service has been changed around in terms of his leadership. This is not just the cabinet secretaries going out. This is ensuring that the entire government, which does not include the executive. For information, the executive here is only constitutionally allowed to do that which the executive can do. Parliament is part of government. Judiciary is part of government. The Inspector General of Police here is completely independent. The president cannot direct him. The president cannot institute anything within the police team. And he resigned today. He's constitutionally protected. You know, our constitution has a lot of securities of tenure here and there, and it ensures that political manipulation within key aspects of government is covered.
All right.
So it is true where the president had proposals within the budget that were in error. He has admitted that error at the end of the day.
Okay.
And the entire finance bill, as we speak, was completely thrown off. And they said, whatever it is that we were supposed to get this revenue through this bill, then we will look for it within austerity measures. And still, where we can't get it through austerity measures, we still have to borrow because government has to be funded.
Okay. Well, according to what we know that the president has come out to say that now that the finance bill would not fly, there will be the need to actually borrow more money to fund the fiscal deficits. So that probably would actually plunge the country into more debt. But then we'll continue to see what other tricks President Ruto has up his sleeves to actually deal with these issues and balance, just as you said, the polity. Thank you so much, Dennis Nthumbi, governance and security expert, for talking to us at this time.
Thank you very much. I truly appreciate it.